I'm 62 years old now, and I've learned that some secrets have a way of destroying families from the inside out. But I never imagined that the biggest secret in my life would be revealed in front of everyone I knew on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse. We didn't have much, but we had love. My mother worked double shifts at the hospital, and my father spent his evenings grading papers by lamplight. They taught me that honesty and hard work were the most important things in life. I believed them. I was 28 when I met Robert Thornton at a charity auction in Boston. I was there representing the elementary school where I taught, trying to win a donation for new library books. Robert was there because his family had donated the venue. He was 33, handsome in that old money way, with perfectly styled hair and a confidence that came from never having to worry about anything. He approached me during the silent auction. I was standing in front of a painting, trying to calculate if I could afford to bid on it with my teacher's salary. He smiled and said I had good taste. Then he outbid everyone else and donated it to my school. I should have known then that this was how his world worked. Money solved everything. Or so they thought. We dated for 8 months. He took me to restaurants I couldn't pronounce, introduced me to a world I'd only seen in movies. His family lived in a mansion in Newton, one of those old colonial estates with circular driveways and gardens maintained by a full-time staff. I felt like Cinderella, except I was smart enough to know that fairy tales don't exist. But I loved him. God help me, I did. And when he proposed on Christmas Eve, in front of his entire family gathered around their enormous fireplace, I said yes. I told myself that love was enough, that I could learn to navigate this world of country clubs and charity galas and people who summered in the Hamptons. We married the following June in a ceremony that cost more than my parents' house. 300 guests, a dress that took 6 months to make, champagne that was older than I was. Robert's mother, Catherine, supervised every detail with the precision of a general. His father, William, gave a toast about continuing the Thornton legacy. And Robert's brother, Michael, served as best man, giving a speech that made everyone laugh about Robert finally settling down. I should have paid more attention to Michael. We moved into the guest house on the Thornton estate while our own home was being built. Robert insisted it made sense. We'd be close to family, and Catherine could help me adjust to my new life. What he meant was that his mother could train me to be a proper Thornton wife. Michael lived in the main house. He was 36, unmarried, working in the family investment firm. He'd always been friendly enough, but there was something about the way he looked at me sometimes that made me uncomfortable. Robert said I was imagining things, that Michael was just protective of the family. 3 months after the wedding, the Thornton family hosted their annual Thanksgiving dinner. It was a production that required weeks of planning. Catherine brought in caterers from New York, hired a string quartet, invited every important family in Boston. I spent the day before helping her arrange place cards and fold napkins into elaborate shapes. The dinner itself was overwhelming. 24 people around a table that probably cost more than most cars. Crystal and china and silverware I had to Google to know which fork to use. I sat between Robert and his uncle, trying to make conversation about the stock market and vacation homes while feeling completely out of my depth. After dinner, while the women retired to the drawing room for coffee and the men gathered in the library for cigars and brandy, Michael found me in the hallway. I was trying to find the bathroom, lost in the maze of rooms. He offered to show me the way, then insisted I join him for a nightcap first. There was a small study off the library, he said, where they kept a special bottle of wine. His father had been saving it for a special occasion, but he thought my first Thornton Thanksgiving qualified. I shouldn't have gone. But I was 28 years old, trying desperately to fit into this family, and when your brother-in-law offers you a drink, you don't want to seem rude. That's what I told myself anyway. The study was beautiful. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, walls lined with books that looked like they'd never been read. Michael poured wine into 2 crystal glasses, then handed me one. He made a toast to family, to new beginnings, to the Thornton legacy. I took a sip. The wine tasted strange. I remember thinking it must be very expensive, very old. Maybe that's why it tasted different from the $5 bottles Robert and I bought before we got married. Michael encouraged me to drink more, said it was a rare vintage, said his father would be honored that I appreciated it. That's the last clear memory I have of that night. I woke up the next morning in the guest house, in my bed, still wearing my dress from dinner. My head felt like it was splitting open. Robert was already gone. There was a note on his pillow saying he had an early meeting. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited. I told myself it was food poisoning. Too much rich food, too much wine. But there were gaps in my memory that frightened me. I couldn't remember leaving the study. Couldn't remember walking back to the guest house. Couldn't remember anything after that second glass of wine Michael had poured. For days afterward, I felt wrong. Not just sick, but violated in a way I couldn't explain. I'd find bruises on my arms, on my thighs, that I couldn't account for. When Michael called to check on me, asking if I was feeling better, there was something in his voice that made my skin crawl. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd simply had too much to drink at my first major family event, that the Thorntons would think I was weak if I couldn't handle their lifestyle. So I pushed the feelings down and tried to forget. 6 weeks later, I missed my period. I took the pregnancy test in the bathroom of my classroom during my lunch break, hiding it in my desk drawer like I was a teenager instead of a married woman. When the 2 lines appeared, I cried. Not from joy, exactly, but from relief. Robert and I had been trying for a baby. This was what we wanted. This was what would make me a real part of the Thornton family. I told Robert that evening. He was ecstatic. He called his parents immediately, opened a bottle of champagne, started talking about turning one of the bedrooms into a nursery. His mother cried with happiness. His father clapped him on the back and said something about continuing the family name. Michael sent a text saying, "Congratulations," with a champagne emoji. The pregnancy continued normally at first. Morning sickness, fatigue, all the expected symptoms. Robert was attentive, bringing me crackers and ginger ale, rubbing my feet when they swelled. Catherine took me shopping for maternity clothes, spending more on a single dress than I used to spend on my monthly rent. But around the 4th month, something changed in Robert. He became distant, cold. He'd come home late from work, barely speaking to me. When I asked what was wrong, he said he was stressed about a deal at the office. But I could feel him watching me sometimes, with an expression I couldn't read. Then, one night, I overheard him on the phone. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom, and I heard his voice coming from his study. He was talking to someone about dates, about timing, about when we'd started trying to conceive. His voice was tight with anger. When I confronted him the next morning, he denied anything was wrong. But I could see it in his eyes. He suspected something, and I didn't know why. The breaking point came at the baby shower Catherine had planned. It was held at the country club, with 40 women I barely knew, playing games and eating tiny sandwiches and cooing over baby clothes that cost more than my monthly teaching salary. I smiled and thanked everyone, and tried to ignore the way Robert's aunt kept making comments about how the baby looked like it would have dark hair, how unusual that would be in the Thornton family. After the shower, as we were loading gifts into Robert's car, he turned to me with an expression of cold fury I'd never seen before. "I want a paternity test," he said. I felt like I'd been slapped. "What?" "You heard me. I want a paternity test, before the baby is born." "Robert, what are you talking about? This is your baby." "Is it?" His voice was deadly quiet. "Because I've been doing some math, Linda, and the timing doesn't quite add up." I felt my legs shaking. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that according to your doctor, you got pregnant around Thanksgiving, but we were barely intimate that month because I was traveling for work. So either this baby came from immaculate conception, or you need to tell me who else you've been sleeping with." "I haven't been with anyone else." "Robert, you're my husband." But he didn't believe me. I could see it in his face. And when he announced that evening, in front of his entire family gathered for Sunday dinner, that he was demanding a paternity test, I realized this wasn't a private suspicion. This was a public execution. His mother gasped. His father demanded to know what was going on. Michael sat very still, his face carefully blank. And Robert, the man I'd married less than a year ago, the man whose baby I was carrying, stood up and said the words that would change everything. "My wife claims this child is mine, but the timing suggests otherwise. I will not be made a fool. I will not raise another man's bastard. Before this baby is born, we will have a DNA test, and the truth will come out." The room erupted. Catherine started crying, saying how could I do this to her son. William demanded I leave their house immediately. Robert's aunt, the one who'd made comments about the baby's hair, looked triumphant. And I sat there, 7 months pregnant, unable to speak, unable to defend myself, because a part of me was starting to remember that night, that Thanksgiving, the strange wine, Michael's voice saying just one more glass, the gaps in my memory, the bruises I couldn't explain, the feeling of being violated that I'd pushed down because it was easier than facing the truth. I moved back to my parents' house in Vermont the next day. Robert didn't try to stop me. His lawyer sent papers demanding the paternity test be conducted as soon as medically safe. I signed them with shaking hands. My mother held me while I cried. My father called a lawyer. And slowly, piece by piece, I started remembering that night. I remembered Michael helping me to a chair when I said I felt dizzy. Remembered him locking the study door, saying we didn't want to be disturbed. Remembered his hands on me, his voice in my ear saying don't fight it, saying this is what you really want, saying no one will ever know. I remembered trying to push him away, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Remembered the room spinning. Remembered pain and shame and the horrible understanding that something terrible was happening and I couldn't stop it. And I remembered waking up in my bed the next morning, my dress askew, my underwear missing, my body aching in ways that had nothing to do with food poisoning. I went to my doctor. I told her what I'd remembered. She examined me, gently, and said there was no physical evidence now, not after 7 months. But she believed me. She'd seen enough cases like this to know the signs. She helped me file a police report. The detective who took my statement was kind but honest. Without physical evidence, without a rape kit from the night it happened, it would be difficult to prosecute. But he said the paternity test might change everything. The test was conducted when I was 8 months pregnant. They took blood from me, from Robert, and from Michael, who Robert had insisted be included because, as he put it, I want to rule out every possibility. I don't think he suspected his own brother. I think he thought I'd had an affair with someone at school. Maybe the gym teacher or the principal, someone from my old life, before I became a Thornton. He was looking for proof that I'd betrayed him. Proof that I was the trashy girl from Vermont his mother had always worried about. We got the results back 2 weeks before my due date. Robert insisted on a family meeting to reveal them. He wanted everyone there, he said. He wanted me to face the people I'd humiliated when the truth came out. So there we were, gathered in the Thornton library. Catherine and William on the sofa, looking grim. Robert standing by the fireplace, arms crossed. Michael in a chair by the window, looking nervous for the first time I'd ever seen. And me, 8.5 months pregnant, sitting alone on a chair that felt like a witness stand. Robert's lawyer opened the envelope. He read the results slowly, professionally, in a voice that showed no emotion. The test confirms that Robert Thornton is not the biological father of the child. Catherine let out a sound like a wounded animal. William stood up, pointing at me, starting to say something about getting me out of their house. But the lawyer wasn't finished. However, the test also confirms that the child shares 50% of DNA with the Thornton family genetic markers. Specifically, the child is biologically related to Michael Thornton. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert turned to look at his brother. His face had gone white. What? Michael stood up, backing toward the door. I don't. There must be some mistake. The test is 99.9% accurate, the lawyer said quietly. Michael Thornton is the biological father. I watched Robert's face as the truth sank in. The accusations he'd made against me, the public humiliation, the way he'd forced me to leave, to live with my parents, to endure months of shame. And all along, it wasn't an affair, it was rape. By his own brother. Robert, I said quietly. That night. Thanksgiving. Michael gave me wine. I don't remember anything after that second glass. I woke up the next morning and my clothes were, I had bruises. I told myself it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. He drugged me. He raped me. And I got pregnant. Michael was still backing toward the door. She's lying. She's just saying that now to cover up her affair. But Robert wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his brother. And in his eyes, I saw recognition. Because he'd known Michael his whole life. He knew what his brother was capable of. "You son of a bitch," Robert whispered. Michael ran. Actually ran from the room. We could hear him in the hallway, hear the front door slam. Robert stood frozen, like he couldn't quite process what had happened. His mother was sobbing. His father sat with his head in his hands. And I sat there, vindicated but hollow. Because yes, the truth was out. Yes, everyone now knew I hadn't betrayed Robert. But it didn't change what had happened to me. It didn't give me back that night, or the months of shame I'd endured, or the way I'd been forced to question my own memories because it was easier to believe I'd gotten drunk than to face the truth. Robert finally looked at me. "Linda, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But you didn't believe me either," I said quietly. "When I told you this baby was yours, when I swore I hadn't been with anyone else, you didn't believe me. You humiliated me in front of your entire family. You threw me out." I thought, The timing was off because your brother raped me at Thanksgiving, not because I had an affair, but you assumed the worst of me. And that tells me everything I need to know about our marriage. I stood up, as much as an 8-month pregnant woman can stand up quickly. Robert's lawyer had called the police while we were talking. They'd already picked up Michael at his apartment. The detective I'd spoken to months ago called to tell me they were charging him with sexual assault and drugging. Robert tried to apologize, tried to beg me to stay, to come home, to let him make it right. His mother cried and said terrible things about Michael, while simultaneously insisting the family could weather this scandal if we all just stuck together. His father offered money, lawyers, anything to keep this quiet. But I was done. Done with the Thorntons, done with their money and their mansion and their idea that everything could be fixed if you just threw enough resources at it. I gave birth 6 weeks later in Vermont, in the small hospital where my mother worked. It was a girl. She had dark hair and dark eyes, and when she cried, it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Because she was mine. Not Michael's. Not the Thorntons'. Mine. Robert came to the hospital. He asked to see her. Asked what I'd named her. I told him Emma, after my grandmother. He asked if he could be part of her life, even though she wasn't biologically his. He said he'd thought about it, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted to try again. But I looked at him, and I saw the man who'd publicly accused me of adultery. The man who'd believed I was a liar and a cheat before he'd believed his brother was a rapist. And I said no. Michael was convicted 8 months later. He's still in prison. He'll be there for another 6 years. The Thornton family tried to pay me to sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep the scandal quiet. I refused. The story made the local papers, then the Boston papers, then some of the national news programs picked it up. The Thorntons lost most of their social standing. Robert eventually moved away from Boston. I raised Emma alone, with help from my parents. I went back to teaching. I eventually met someone new, someone kind who loved Emma like she was his own. We've been married for 30 years now. Emma is 33 years old now, with kids of her own. She knows her origin story. I told her when she was old enough to understand, because I didn't want her to find out from someone else, didn't want her to think there was anything shameful about how she came into this world. She struggled with it, especially as a teenager, but she's an amazing woman. Strong and smart and fiercely protective of the people she loves. Robert reached out once, about 10 years ago. He said he'd never stopped thinking about Emma, about what could have been if he'd just believed me from the start. I told him I'd forgiven him, because holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. But I also told him that forgiveness doesn't mean we get to go back. It just means we get to move forward. I look at my granddaughters now, and I think about the lessons I want them to learn. I want them to know that your worth isn't determined by who believes you, that you can survive things you never thought possible, that sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. I want them to know that when someone drugs you, when someone rapes you, when someone violates your body and your trust, it's not your fault. No matter what anyone says, no matter who doesn't believe you, it's not your fault. And I want them to know that you can be humiliated, you can be knocked down, you can have your entire life torn apart in front of everyone you know. But you don't have to stay down. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can take the shattered pieces of your life and create something new, something stronger. The DNA test that was supposed to expose me as a liar instead exposed the truth about the Thornton family. It revealed that their perfect image, their money, their status, couldn't protect them from the rot growing inside their own home. It showed everyone that I'd been telling the truth all along. But more than that, it showed me that I didn't need their belief to survive. I didn't need their acceptance or their approval or their money. I had something they would never have. I had the truth, and I had myself. That's what I tell women now when they ask me how I got through it. When they share their own stories of not being believed, of being blamed for their own assaults, of watching their lives fall apart because they dared to speak up, I tell them what I learned in that library, watching the truth destroy the family that had tried to destroy me. You can humiliate us. You can knock us down. You can call us liars and cheaters and try to make us doubt our own memories. But we know what happened to us. And eventually, the truth always comes out. And when it does, we'll still be here, still standing, still surviving, still strong, because that's what we do. We rise.